Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories. Freed from prison, Oscar Pistorius is out on parole after serving 9 years for murdering his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. Second setback for Ousmane Sonko in less than 24 hours in the Senegalese judiciary saga. The opposition leader's candidacy for next presidential election has been rejected on the grounds his application was incomplete. Dialysis saves lives for those suffering from kidney failures, but not for those who can't afford the treatment. We'll go to Benin, where patients risk dying for lack of no longer getting full medical coverage for chronic diseases. Oscar Pistorius has been released from prison nearly 11 years after killing his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. A board in November found that the former athlete was fit for parole. Pistorius was to serve 13 years and 5 months. Steenkamp's mother said her family was serving a life sentence. Eunice Masson is our correspondent in South Africa, and she has more details. So Eunice, please tell us what happened.
Yeah, no, it's just over a decade ago when the law graduate and model Reeva Steenkamp was fatally shot by Pistorius on Valentine's Day in 2013. And after serving half of his 13 years, 5 months sentence, Pistorius has now been released on parole. And I'm going to try to keep this brief because it's been a really complex trial the past decade. But Pistorius was initially convicted of culpable homicide in 2014. He was jailed for 5 years, but was released on parole in 2015 after serving only a fraction of his sentence. Now, the state took the matter to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and Pistorius was ultimately convicted of murder. He was sent to prison for another 6 years. However, this sentence was considered lenient, and it was raised to 13 years and 5 months. Now, Pistorius turned to the Constitutional Court last year after he was denied parole in March. Now, the state argued that he did not complete his required sentence and was not eligible for parole, but Pistorius won the case and was granted parole in November, as you've mentioned, Clarisse, and that's where we are now. And the athlete has always maintained his innocence, and while on parole, he will be subject to conditions until his sentence expires in 2029.
Eunice Masson, live from Cape Town in South Africa. Thank you very much, Eunice. So what has been the reactions in South Africa to this release? Laurent Berstecher tells the story.
Walking out of jail after serving only 2/3 of his sentence, the release of Oscar Pistorius was met with outrage by women's rights activists who worried it was setting a dangerous precedent for potential abusers.
I think it's high time in this country that we stop making predators feel like this is the safe haven. South Africa is the place to be as a predator, because it's definitely not the place to be as a victim or a survivor.
Pistorius was serving a 13-and-a-half-year prison sentence for killing model Reeva Steenkamp in 2013. But the former Olympic athlete was granted parole in November and walked free on Friday after spending less than 9 years behind bars. Pistorius will remain subject to a series of restrictions, including limitations of movement and having to attend mandatory courses on gender-based violence until his sentence ends in 2029. Yet his release left South Africans divided.
Let the man go home. He's done his time, and remember, it's also about being integrated into society.
I believe in second chances, and it's okay that he got out. But then I don't really think women would feel safe around him because history tends to repeat itself.
Justice doesn't serve us as women. That's all we know. That's what we know.
South Africa has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world. Every day, 12 women on average are murdered in the country, while over 20% of South African women have experienced physical violence by a partner in their lifetime.
To Senegal now, in the latest blow for the country's main opposition leader, Ousmane Sonko has been blocked by the top court from running in next month's presidential election. The Constitutional Council said his application was incomplete. Shirley Sidbon has the details.
Second setback for Ousmane Sonko in less than 24 hours. The popular opposition leader has been barred from running for president next month. Senegal's Constitutional Council said his application was incomplete.
When we got in, the president of the council, Badio Camara, told us the file was incomplete. This means they opened and examined the application without a representative for Mr. Sonko. And that's illegal.
That was the last nail in his candidacy's coffin. Hours earlier, the Supreme Court had upheld Sonko's defamation conviction against a government minister. Sonko alleged that a series of trials brought against him in recent years aimed to disqualify him from the race. He came third in 2019's presidential election and was seen as the main challenger for the ruling party's candidate. Sonko's many supporters saw a glimmer of hope when a court overturned a ruling against him in December. They are now both disappointed and determined to act.
We must fight because those who govern us work for the youth, and the youth wants Ousmane Sonko to be the next president.
Other officials from Ousmane Sonko's party, PASTEF, have submitted applications for the presidency, hoping to have at least one candidate approved.
Now to another trial, another Ousmane Sonko, not the same. And this time I'm talking about the former Gambian interior minister under ex-dictator Yahya Jammeh. He will go on trial in Switzerland on Monday, and he's accused of crimes against humanity committed under Jammeh's regime. If found guilty, he faces life imprisonment. Caroline Reynolds is a lawyer and represents some of the victims, but Ousmane Sonko denies all the charges. Let's hear both lawyers for each side.
The plaintiffs that I represent are delighted that finally an executioner can answer for the acts that were committed against them, a high-ranking official. So it is important that the thinking heads of the regime are brought to justice and not just the lower-level perpetrators.
He's Minister of the Interior. He isn't God Almighty. He doesn't control all of what's happening in Gambia. In a previous period, he was Chief of Police. He had the skills of a Chief of Police. He didn't control what happened outside of his field of competence.
Dialysis is a treatment that helps filter the blood when the kidneys are not able to. A treatment that's been saving many lives. But in Benin, since the government stopped the full medical coverage for chronic illnesses, there's been an increase in the mortality rates, with nearly 500 dialysis patients dying within 2 years since the healthcare reform.
Eliel's parents have had to move into their unfinished house early to afford his dialysis treatments. The move meant they could stop paying rent elsewhere.
We are trying to make ends meet. It's already a financial burden and mentally exhausting due to the heavy healthcare requirements.
For nearly a year, Eliel's parents have been paying 600,000 francs, about 1,000 euros per month, after Benin suspended healthcare coverage for new cases in 2019. Only government employees were exempt.
We've been doing this out of our own pockets for nearly 12 months before my employer's insurance finally agreed to support us. What we really want is government assistance.
This man's sister passed away in August because their family couldn't afford her dialysis treatments.
At the beginning, we had friends, relatives, brothers, everyone pitching in. But at some point, everyone was exhausted. We couldn't do anything more. We were standing there watching our sister die.
Currently, new dialysis patients face a 20% copay, with the state covering the remaining costs. Campaigners are demanding the return of full healthcare coverage.
From 2019 until now, we have witnessed many deaths among dialysis patients due to lack of proper care. We've done everything. We've reached out to all the relevant institutions, hoping for a 100% coverage of dialysis treatment for all Beninese citizens, but we've been ignored.
The Dialysis Life Association has filed an appeal with Benin's Supreme Court to annul the ministerial decree that reduced healthcare coverage down to 80% for some patients and entirely withdrew it for private sector employees.
90% of African birds of prey are under threat. A new report says raptors across the continent are facing an extinction crisis and calls for protected areas to be expanded and better controlled. Sam Bradpitt has more from Dakar.
Eagles, vultures and falcons across the African continent are vanishing into oblivion. Those are the words of one of the scientists involved with this latest study. Nearly all of the 42 birds surveyed as part of this research were found to be experiencing massive population collapse. There are multiple causes of this phenomenon, notably the expansion of livestock grazing and urbanization, which is encroaching on habitats. There's also the fact that many birds are killed either for food or traditional medicine purposes, and increasingly birds are colliding with power lines and wind turbines. Birds of prey play a really important role in ecosystems, and some species like vultures can play an important role in protecting human health as well. One scientist I spoke to recently in Guinea-Bissau explained to me that without vultures, dead animals can lie rotting close to places like rivers and streams, contaminating them, and then potentially poisoning an important source of drinking water for many rural communities.
Thank you for watching this edition of Eye on Africa. Stay tuned for more news.
Con alegría siempre. Me gusta Francia 24 horas porque nos enteramos de las noticias de Europa, de América Latina y de todos lados. Nos gusta mucho la cultura francesa.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait. That's why at France 24, we'll always be there to help make sense of world events. For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.